Let's head to our conversation for today, which has to do with the eco currency. The Economic Community of West African States has set its sights on 2027 for the launch of the eco single currency, which is arguably one of the regional bloc's boldest economic steps. While the move reflects unity, stability, and a new era of regional power, questions around readiness, sovereignty, and economic discipline remain. I have with me here in the studio Tilewa Adebajo, CEO of CFG Advisory, and Akintunde Makjekudumi, an independent debt capital specialist, and virtually Samuel Mati, president of the African Foundation for Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. You're here to discuss if truly West Africa is prepared for the monetary union. Tilewa, let me start with you. We're seeing this move over the years, more or less the goalposts being shifted several times. Now, the big question has always been around convergence. And then let's start off basically looking at how all this pans out. And basically, in terms of the convergence criteria, let's look at the countries that can fit that position.
Well, it's something that has been on the cards since the Economic Community for West African States has been there, and it's been postponed and looked at. And obviously, the challenges most people were facing post-COVID, most of the countries in West Africa, as you said in your report, with Senegal trying to grapple with their fiscal issues, inflationary pressures, gives a cause for concern. So I think, yes, while the currency might be launched next year, which might be a good idea, I think it's evident that the currency would run concurrently with other sovereign currencies, and I believe that it will indeed help trade, first of all, within the West African sub-region. So instead of trying to get CFA, I think most people will probably get ECO, and instead of buying Naira, most people will get ECO to be able to settle their transaction. But we should also bear in mind that the Afro-Exim Bank has this the African payment settlement systems. So these are bold directions, bold moves in the right direction.
All right, let me come to you now, Akintunde. Let's look at being a debt specialist. Let's look at one of the things, a major criteria, for the convergence has been debt. Let's look at looking at how the West African region has been over the last 10 years. Let's also put into consideration the era of COVID, where we saw borrowing go very high. And then at the point where a lot of governments in West Africa are grappling with higher debts. Let's look at how the introduction of ECO would help address this debt burden.
Thank you very much, Akin. Yeah, so let's just take a different tack here and not really focus on the macro, but like you said, from a debt perspective. Now, it's clear that a single currency will be very much beneficial for debt capital markets, or just debt in general, because it does two things, really. One, it removes the FX risk premium. You have a single region that is trading a single currency, and that effectively means those regional members do not have to contend with FX volatility anymore. So that is very much beneficial in terms of debt and how debt is moved around. When we're talking about capital markets, it's really about moving of capital efficiently around the region and at scale. So FX is one thing. The other thing is a unified investor base. You're effectively pooling investors together, and once you do that, you have investors that are more able to participate in terms of funding sovereigns and funding corporates. But this is just to say that the single currency is just one thing. It's just one part of the plumbing. You still need to have governance and institutional structures in place in order for the single currency to actually be a working ecosystem that is beneficial to things like trade and investment.
Now, this takes me to my next question. And Mr. Mati, like he rightly said, having that presence is important. Integration is one of the key things here we're talking about. Let's look at how this, in terms of achieving that integration, will see the effective implementation of the ECO.
Thanks a lot. As far as I'm concerned, there were a lot of hearsay regarding a single currency, but we should know that a single currency is not a solution for all the problems going on right now in Africa. We've seen that Europe has a single currency. It didn't yield much. and then French-speaking countries in West and Central Africa have single currency. It hasn't changed so much their economy. We should understand that single currency as an economist, currency is just a mean to exchange transactions, and then we should reconfigure in the context. Basically, currency will just give or prepare the ground to accelerate a number of things like regional trade and so on and so forth. And then those integration tools have to be implemented. We can have that single currency, but if I cannot come to Nigeria as an Ivorian or as a Senegalese and establish myself with no problem, if we don't still have like high corruption, single currency will not do anything about it. So that's my point of view at this point in time.
All right, thank you so much. I mean, like you rightly put, one of the things he said basically is the fact that, I mean, the ECO is a single currency. It's a currency that enables quite a lot of activities here in the region. And we know basically how it's been. And one of the areas we're also going to look at is how the Francophone West African countries have been able to drive that integration in terms of ensuring that, you know, with the influence of France here and achieving that unified currency for the Francophone West African country. But Tilewa, let's look at one thing that really, really drives at the heart of this is the question of when we have this ECO, we have to look at monetary and fiscal discipline. Nigeria being a case study here, being West Africa's biggest economy, let's put it in that context. Do you think there will be a case where, in terms of the value, and it's against the Naira, in terms of the value, a lot of questions will be asked. Will Nigeria decide to put the Naira aside, or are we going to see a case where it will be a battle of the CFA and the Naira?
Well, I think first of all, let us understand where we're going. There's already a roadmap. I think the Europeans have done it successfully with the European Union, and they have a single Europe currency with the European Central Bank, and all the other countries also have their central banks. So all the countries have the central banks, and they all work with the central European Central Bank. So there's that model in place. So it depends on how you want to look at that. But obviously, every country will still want to retain their own central banks, without a doubt. And we already have a central bank, within that region that will help with managing and coordinating a lot of the institutional building that you referred to. So I think that's understanding that roadmap. How we adopt this is now what we do. But the Francophone countries already have a central currency. So for them, it's easier to work with. They understand that working with a single currency, which is the CFA. So it's a question of, with the 12 central bank governors that met, how do we integrate Nigeria with the Naira, the Ghanaians with the CD, and all the other countries with the currencies they're using. So, but the key issue here is that it's very simple. We already have a currency we're using in West Africa now, which is the dollar. So I think the first logical step is let the ECO replace the dollar. So if you can let the ECO replace the dollar as our settlement currency within the West African region, that is a very important first step. Because when you start taking a look at if a country has fiscal challenges, how does it manage its exchange rate and to be able to stay loyal to the center? As you can see, even the Europeans have a difficulty in managing this, but they found a way around it. And that's why you've seen they've had to do the bailouts with Greece and carry some of the lagging countries along. So Germany, France is stepping along and is carrying up, Italy and also Greece. So Germany, France, and Italy is carrying along Italy and all the other smaller countries that are lagging behind. So, it's a step by step. So I think the first logical step is, let us replace the dollar with the ECO, and let's see how that works, and let the central banks begin to manage that currency, because you have to print that currency, you have to circulate that currency, Then again, you have to have the settlement systems that will support these structures. So that all these infrastructure needs to be put in place. And like the other gentleman said from Cote d'Ivoire, then if he's coming to Nigeria to do business, or I'm coming to Ivory Coast to do business, then all I need to do is carry my Echo wallet. And as you've said earlier, we need to be able to absorb or let the foreign exchange risk disappear.
Indeed. I mean, you made a very valid point here. I mean, let's just quickly go on a quick break. We'll be looking at this conversation further, and then more importantly, we'll be looking at how this convergence can work, and then also in terms of what ECOWAS's plan is. We're seeing the ECOWAS passport, and then also the currency. We're looking at the ECO currency, the launch which is planned for 2027. Let me jump now right to Samuel Mate. Just before the break, we're talking about Mr. Adebajo was mentioning the fact that having the ECO currency, pushing the dollar aside is one thing, but we can't take away the CFA factor in this space. Mr. Mate, let's look at how that playbook has been with the CFA franc, how it has been, and then if we're going to see that power play here, because one thing is for the political will, and the next is also for us to see the actual implementation of this. What do you think the CFA franc, the playbook will be for Francophone West African countries?
I mean, Akin, you should understand that, I mean, in 2020, the French-speaking country, the Francophone countries, tried to hijack the project, but that was unsuccessful because in 2020, President Ouattara and President Macron suggested that the other countries in West Africa should rather align with the CFA and that they will rename the CFA ECO. But that project was definitely pushed aside. What you should understand is that the CFA, despite the fact that the proponent of CFA has been talking about a stable currency, the CFA actually is a hard peg currency to the euro. In that regard, the French are sitting at the board of the central bank of Francophone countries in West Africa, and then number two, to have that peg, the French-speaking countries, the Francophone countries are obliged to keep their gold and foreign currency at the central bank of France, which for a lot of independent-minded economists, African economists, is a form of colonization. And that's one of the things that Nigeria in lead have rejected in 2020 when President Macron and Ouattara tried to suggest that Nigeria and other countries join the CFA. So it's going to be hard to play. That's why personally I was satisfied with the fact that the Anglophone-speaking countries led by Nigeria have decided to go into a single currency, leaving out the CFA people, and then with time they can see how they can merge and come together. So it's going to be hard to play.
Indeed. I mean, thankfully, the project is more or less like a phased project. But one thing that we are not more or less paying attention to is in the digital asset side. Tilewa, let me ask you this. This is one area that's where we are currently, like the ECOWAS stable coin, and
well, you see, all these cryptos, you see, when you're taking a look at this integration going forward, you have to be conscious of the modern and what's the trends with fintech. The fintech and the cryptos have changed the landscape for integration, which can make it easier. But the issues is that the central banks still have a role to play. And I think that, as the gentleman from Ivory Coast has mentioned, there's still challenges that you need to make up, which is issue of your reserves and the hard peg of the CFA to the euro through the French central bank. We need to break that system in order for the ECO to work. So that's why I'm saying that it is these digital currencies, these cryptos, these fintechs that will drive the initial integration of the ECO. So the ECO will probably work best as a digital wallet. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Exactly. Let's look at the WAEMU case study.
Okay. Well, it's interesting in terms of digital currency, but just taking a step back from that. Like I was saying, mostly I was talking initially just theoretically, but we do have a case study for all of this, and that is the WAEMU region with the CFA franc, the single currency, as you mentioned. And that's been around for decades. So what has that actually done in terms of debt? Has that increased debt in the region? So let's look at that. So when we look at the prevalence of debt capital, debt issuance, and we look at the rest of ECOWAS, so non-WAEMU ECOWAS, there's not really much in the way of debt issuance. It's really just Nigeria driving debt issuance. There's roughly about 3 trillion naira of debts outstanding from the private sector, that is, including state government. And the rest is a few issuances, predominantly in Ghana. WAEMU hasn't actually done much better. The prevalence of debt capital in the form of bonds is still pretty much around the same as the rest of ECOWAS, low, mid, single digits outstanding to GDP. So where do we actually see this benefit, this theoretical benefits I talk about? If we actually look through the banking channels, we can see something there. So if you look at the balance sheet of WAEMU banks, about 20, 25, 30%, let's just be conservative, 20 to 30% of GDP is being lent by WAEMU banks to corporates, predominantly WAEMU corporates. Now, when you look at that same ratio in non-WAEMU ECOWAS, or your Anglophone ECOWAS, if you like, that ratio is more like 10 to 15%. Now, what that tells me is that definitely the single currency has helped in this intermediation between the banks and the corporates from a banking perspective. But really what we want to talk about here is how is it going to help disintermediation? How do corporates fund themselves without the need for banks? How do they just issue their own debt? Now, like we've been saying, there's so many different things that need to happen, various institutions, various governance, various regulation, etc. Also, corporates are generally quite happy across the region funding by themselves through relationship banking, bilateral banking with their banks. So that kind of attitude or stance needs to change for capital markets to be more prevalent. That is one thing. And like I said to start with, you also need the institutions, the governance structures. And then over time, yes, once those catalysts are in play, you will see a much deeper capital markets across the region. But right now, you can see some of the effects of a single currency. But single currency is only part of the plumbing. A lot of other things need to happen.
All right, let me come to Matty here. One of the things we've seen with the WAEMU region basically is the fact that the CFA has really played a very integral role in terms of driving a unified region. Let's look at what's at play at Senegal. Senegal couldn't access international markets, but the local debt market has been able to drive that. But one of the things we'll have to look at again in terms of convergence is the Sahel region. We've seen Mali, Burkina Faso and the likes exit ECOWAS. What is the strategy? What do you think is the best strategy in terms of integrating these three countries that are not with ECOWAS?
Yeah, thanks, Akin. As you know, Mali, Burkina, and Niger have left the ECOWAS, are now kind of like under military regime. And I've had a discussion. I was, in the past month, I visited Niger. I was in Niger for 2 weeks. And then I had a discussion with people. And apparently, some people around the head of state in Niger was telling me that he had a discussion up, and then they are ready or they are willing to have a discussion with a Nigeria-led group for a single currency as far as France is not involved. They fully understand that the importance of coming together, of having a federal Africa. That's why they were talking about IOS. They want to come with a federal country. We all understand that a United States of Africa will be much more powerful than our single country, our single countries going forward. So I strongly believe that those countries will be willing to join because they have a lot of problems. That's why they left ECOWAS, but you in Nigeria, in other part of Africa, should understand that they refuse to leave UMOA, the CFA zone, because they fully understand that if they leave UMOA, the CFA zone, they will be in trouble because they are not strong enough to have their own currency. And amazingly, they refuse to leave. They had a very hard discussion with Côte d'Ivoire, who wanted them to, when they left ECOWAS, they wanted them to leave UMOA, the CFA zone as well, but they refused. They negotiate to stay in the CFA, which clearly push us to understand that they really understand the importance of having a single currency or having a currency where they can move around. And then based on what undisclosed sources I have in Niger, they will be willing to have a discussion to join a single currency led by Nigeria.
In fact, we can exhaust this conversation over a day. But I mean, let's give our closing statements. Are we seeing another goalpost being shifted? 30 seconds.
I don't think so. I think it's a process. We need to, first of all, introduce the ECO and let us use that side by side with other currency to settle trade within the sub-region. And then we'll evolve from there. Once the ECO replaces the dollar, then we'll get to the next level.
Yes, the ECO certainly has positive implications for both debt and debt capital. But you need a lot of other things, institutions, etc., to work in line with that to be supportive of debt capital.
Mr. Mate, your closing statement.
My closing statement is that ECO, I think, congratulations to Nigeria, because from the beginning, 10 years ago, I've been saying it, that's the way to go. You shouldn't wait for CFA. You should move ahead. That's what Nigeria is doing, and phasing out with Nigeria and the 6 other countries coming with the ECO, and then we'll move it from there. But everyone should understand that having a single currency is just the first step.
All right.
It's not going to resolve all the problem. We still need to solve the problem of having to move between countries, having the same right for everybody across countries in the region. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. I've been speaking with Tilewa Adebajo, CEO of the CFG Advisory, Akintunde Majekodumi, an independent debt capital specialist, and Samuel Mate, president of the African Foundation for Entrepreneurship and Economic Development.